Hi everyone, and welcome. First of all, I'm here with Angus MacDonald, director and co-founder of ANS International, and he's going to be giving us more information about top tips for lubricating wire ropes and why it's so important. So, Angus, the floor is yours.
Martin, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon as part of LRVS EMEA. I've been involved in several of these over the years, attending as a delegate. It's my first time presenting. And once again, it's been a really high quality day full of really informative presentations. I've learned an awful lot, and I hope you have. So thank you for taking the time out to join me this afternoon. You've obviously, if you're here, got an interest in terms of the importance of wire ropes as an application. And I'm going to be taking you through this afternoon a few top tips for lubricating that application and why it's so important. Just before I get started, just a bit of background about myself. My name is Angus MacDonald. I'm a director and a co-founder of a British company called ANS International. We're based about an hour west of London. Me personally, I'm nearly 20 years in the lubrication distribution business. The majority of that, my previous company, we represented an American lubricants company called Lubrication Engineers. I'm very proud to be qualified for various lubrication-related qualifications, including the MLT 1 and 2 and the STLE CLS. For the past nearly 5 years, ANS International has represented a range of 8 brands, all that have a link to the machinery lubrication sector. That includes Fluidtech. I'm sitting here in Fluidtech's offices in Dordrecht, but includes a range of other solutions, including wire rope lubrication, which we've been involved with for more than 15 years, maintenance chemicals and maintenance lubricants, fuel additives, all of which have a major focus on lubricants and the importance of fill for life. And okay, lubrication. Why is it so important? Well, wire ropes are an integral part of means and applications around the world, mostly performing really important critical daily tasks. The design of a wire has multiple forming strands around a core, and this structure provides a lot of strength, ability, its ability and various loads, depending on each operation that's involved with. In particular, guarantee that it will need lubrication in order to keep the core and the wire strands in their very best condition. This, in turn, understandably, will guarantee safe, which is obviously always very important, and effective operation for businesses, rating and maintenance costs. So why should we be looking at lubricating wire rope? Well, presentations on big key applications like turbines, compressors, hydraulic systems, that kind of thing. But raise lubrication wire rates by up to 300%, improved safety for operators, and really importantly as well, increase the availability of equipment. So we're going to be reducing downtime. So why do ropes fail in the field? There's a list of these failure modes down below. Most of these, not all of them, but most can be avoided by implementing a lubrication program, ideally involving the use of an automated lubrication system. But these include internal corrosion. It's incredible how much moisture and water makes its way inside ropes. External corrosion, obviously a lot of the rope is exposed to the general weather conditions. Fatigue from bending. There's also external wear of strands as they contact sheaves and drums on the particular application. Excessive strain, and unfortunately there's also accidental damage, and that can't always be controlled, and that depends obviously on the industry. But most of these failure modes can be controlled or significantly reduced by some quality lubrication. So some lubrication is understandably better than none at all. When I visit customers around the world, it still amazes me how many companies aren't actually implementing any sort of lubrication on their wire ropes. However, the majority, I'd say, are still manually lubricating ropes in multiple industries, and through a few of those. Firstly, it's extremely labor intensive. It's a slow process. It will mean that there's increased expensive equipment downtime because those ropes can't be working normally, so that's an added high cost. It's normal workers being involved in a relatively non-value adding activity. Importantly, it's extremely messy. You can imagine, we've got a couple of examples there, particularly on the right-hand side, these huge ropes. Again, the extra mess leads to equipment downtime because cleaning is needed for the surrounding area. There's a lot of wastage of lubricant. A lot of the lubricant doesn't actually make its way onto the rope, but onto the floor, into the general environment. And it tends to also involve an excessive use of rags, gloves, overalls, that kind of thing. Unfortunately as well, manual lubrication tends to be fairly ineffective. As you can see from the picture on the right-hand side, it typically, when a lubricant's being applied by gloves or brushes or maybe a spray, you're typically only going to be coating the outside rope strands. So the core of the rope will not be receiving any lubrication. You're not going to be getting any real penetration, particularly if you're just slapping grease on the outside of that rope. Hence, corrosion and wear is then possible. Also, there's no water displacement from the rope internals. So the water will remain in there. And again, as I've just mentioned, that internal corrosion is going to build up, which can lead to rope failure fairly rapidly. Inconsistent application will lead to ineffective lubrication. So yes, the lubrication, some is better than none at all. But I hope you can see here that manual side of things, it isn't that effective. And finally, with this business, if they're handling rope workers will be coming into contact with wearing gloves or whatever. It's not a safe environment. Very often, as you've seen some from the previous application photos, they're generally working at heights to do the lubrication, which again leads to dangers. And I've already mentioned can be environmental contamination with excess lube dripping off the ropes, entering maybe waterways or sensitive areas. And again, it's a slow process. It means the equipment's not working, which means you've got downtime, which is adding to the costs for the client. And I've mentioned already that there's numerous workers being utilized on a non-value added activity. Extremely, I mean, I was with a port facility in the UK a few weeks ago, and they were talking, they still manually lubricate the wire ropes. They've got a fleet of 80 straddle carriers, and the maintenance team said to make sure they're completely clean before they can be used again. And they said that takes hours and hours. So it just shows that even in a very modern port facility, there's still a lot of manual lubrication being used. In that case, what is the alternative? What these days should be the best practice solution for lubricating wire ropes? For about the last years, a number of companies have been changing the way the industry looks at wire rope lubrication. It was back in the early 80s, the first kind of automated method for lubricating ropes was developed in the UK. It was a product called the Arnica. And in the subsequent years, in the 90s and the noughties and up to now, other similar units were then developed and followed on. And there's quite a wide, say, you name it. As well as just lubricating ropes now, it's also involving the cleaning of ropes. So the removal of contaminants prior to the actual lubrication of the ropes, ensuring an even more effective penetration into the rope. So when clients choose an automatic wire rope lubrication system, why are they? Well, number one, they're generally interested in increasing the life of their wire rope. I've already mentioned that it's been proven over the years that with really quality lubrication, safe by up to 300%, and that's mainly down to superior corrosion and wear protection. I've talked a lot about with manual lubrication how timely and how much time that takes. With an automatic lubrication system, again, it's been proven over the last few years that the amount of labor required for the lubrication when you're using a unit can be reduced by up to 90%. A number of the units on the market these days can achieve lubrication speeds of up to 2,000 meters an hour. And I've also mentioned a couple of times already downtime. With that kind of reduction in lubrication, we can really have a significant reduction in expensive downtime, meaning that critical applications such as cranes can keep on working for much longer periods of time. So how do the wire rope lubricators actually work? They are all, as you've seen some of those earlier photos, fairly similar in design. The collar, this clamps of the rope. Inside the collar, we have a pair of seals generally, which are designed specifically for wire rope diameters. This collar is then filled with the lubricant, which tends to be a grease, was applied from a grease pump. Inside the collar here, I mentioned the seals. As per specific diameters of rope, the rope is pulled through the collar, and depending on the design of the seal, very often they're working to hydraulically work the grease into the rope. These kind of units are often called pressure lubricators, which is really not accurate in terms of when you're dealing with a rope. It's not a solid structure and you can't completely seal that collar, so it's not really under pressure, but you're filling that collar. And with that specific example here, with the design of the seal, as the rope travels through that collar, the seals actually hydraulically massage the grease inside that rope. Thirdly, and as I said, more in probably the last 5-6 years, wire rope cleaners have been developed. Again, these are very much designed specifically depending on the lay of the rope, right-hand lay or left-hand lay, the number of strands. So you'll either have a 6-strand rope, 8-strand, or a multi-strand or armored. So those are designed to be attached to the rope in front of the collar. So as the rope moves along before the collar, that rope cleaner does a fantastic job at removing a lot of contaminants off the rope, allowing a clean rope to then be lubricated. I've just got a very quick video because it's easier to explain it by a short video. So this is actually taken from a coal loader in Indonesia, I think 5 or 6 years ago. We posted this on our LinkedIn profile earlier this year. And the reason I've included some of these figures is just to show how interested people are in this kind of application. So, nearly 75,000 views of this particular video, over 4,000 engagements, nearly 2,000 likes, a lot of reposts, etc. So it's still incredible how many people and companies do not know that this type of lubrication method exists. So we'll just have a quick look at this particular unit. There, the front of the collar, that's the wire rope cleaner removing a lot of the excess old lubricant from the rope. And out the other side of the collar, you can then see a really well lubricated, consistent level of lubrication. The rope. You can see there's no spillage of grease from the collar. It's all going on the rope, so there's no lubricant being wasted. And as I said, in front of the collar, importantly, all the old contamination is being removed and collected, so that you're getting a really nice, clean rope going into the collar to be fitted. So moving on again in terms of how the wire rope lubricators work, I've mentioned generally you're applying a grease, and they can vary from LGI 00 up to maybe a non-tacky LGI 2. And of customers around the world are using a 0 or 1. A range of greases have been proven to be effectively applied using lubricators, and the choice will depend on LETs, so the load, environment, temperature, speed, and obviously the type of application. So that particular image is a 00 grease being used on a mobile crane in a mining facility. This is a number 1 lithium tacky grease being used on a winch in a shipyard. And then finally, also, it is possible to apply oils. It's not quite as easy as using a grease, but that can sometimes be required depending on the application. So this is a mining winder in Canada, and depending on the type of application, there sometimes an oil is required. So how do the wire rope greases actually work? Well, they have 3 main lubricating properties. As with any lubricant, the first layer, you've got a hydrodynamic full film lubrication with the oil film. But once you get any sort of higher temperature, or with the wire rope, it's normally heavier loads, this protective film will often become very thin and can rupture. You then tend to have a second layer of protection, which tends to be extreme pressure additives. And this is activated by the heat of the friction of the metal-to-metal contact when that oil film's been ruptured. And then they react to the metal surface and form a protective chemical film. And often, but not always, there's a third layer, maybe a solid lubricant suspended in the grease oil. So when that oil film ruptures and the EP additives no longer are protecting, these solid lubricant additives can then also physically separate those metal surfaces. And they could be the well-known additives like Teflon, Moly, or unique ones like Almatol. There's many types of brands of greases that have been used in wire rope lubricators around the world. This is just a snapshot. As you can see, the majority of the major lubricant companies are included. I think something that's of big interest is the number of products that are VGP compliant, which is the Vessel General Permit from the US, which is needing an environmentally acceptable lubricant, generally for maritime applications. But I mentioned, our role with sustainability earlier on in the presentation. We're finding more and more clients are also interested in using an EAL type grease for applying to their ropes in case of that product dropping off the rope, entering waterways or sensitive environmental areas. But as I said, there's a very wide range of brands of greases and types of grease that can be applied through these types of lubricators. The lubricators can be used in a variety of applications, but in terms of location, we often get asked this. It needs to be where the wire rope can be moved past a fixed point and where the lubricating unit can be safely anchored. They're generally being used to lubricate moving ropes on cranes in particular. So that particular picture there at a port, where you can see the anchor cables there, and the rope is then being pulled through the collar to be lubricated. There needs to be a suitable air supply. Access to air is critical because obviously it's supplying and helping the grease pump work, which then supplies the grease to the collar. This is an example in Portugal. So you can see the grease pump there into a pail of grease, and it's then entering in the collar. But more recently, again, probably the last 3 or 4 years, it has also now become possible to also clean and lubricate stationary ropes. And that is done by actually, instead of pulling the rope through the collar, it's pulling the collar along the rope using a pulley system. And so this particular image there is, I'll talk about it shortly, on Ascension Island. These are guy ropes from very high communication towers. And very simply, this collar is linked up to a capstan, and they're successfully pulling the collar up the rope. They're like 100-meter long ropes, and they're able to clean and lubricate these stationary ropes in that way. What are the results? Well, several, and they're all positive. Wire rope penetration. I mentioned before in terms of the ability of the seals to hydraulically almost rub the grease into the rope. We generally achieve a really successful level of grease penetration to the core of most wire rope diameters, ensuring individual strands receive the protective grease. And these are just a couple of pictures from various clients where they've actually opened up the rope afterwards in order to understand how much penetration has been achieved. Obviously, if you're getting to really large wire rope diameters, maybe 100 millimeters or more, then that's not necessarily going to be possible. But what we do find with those really large ropes over time, due to the loads and stresses on the ropes, the grease is over time manipulated towards the core of the rope. I mean, I think the largest diameter I've been involved lubricating was 110 millimeters on a large offshore crane. They were very pleased with how well the lubricator did the job, but you're going to struggle to obviously get penetration into 110 millimeter wire rope there. Importantly, you achieve a consistent level of application of the lubricant, so it's going to receive the correct amount of grease. Depending on the type of the rope, the grease is going to be, as I say, penetrating the core, filling the valleys, and also having a protective film over all those outside wire strands. And then finally, as well, I've just shown you on the video the importance of the removal of contamination. So these rope cleaners do a fantastic job at removing any old lubricant or other contaminants from the rope prior to entering the collar. And this is really crucial, because without that, how are you going to be able to effectively lubricate that rope? So that's been extremely important, and ensures that you have a better job and you waste less grease. We see it with manual lubrication all the time. When they're not cleaning the rope, you're just piling more lubricant on top of old lubricant and not actually doing the job. Okay, so what are the results of correctly lubricating ropes? I've got 4 quick case studies here to run through. The first one is involving a ship loader at a coal terminal in Australia. When they previously were manually lubricating the ship loader, it was taking 2 people 2 days every 2 months. It was a really dangerous job. They were suspended from the rope in a basket, and it was really messy conditions, and they were concerned with the amount of grease and lubricant that was dropping from the rope into the environment, whether it's the ocean or the port side. Once they introduced the use of a wire rope lubricator, it was then taking one person only 2 hours every 7 months. So I think you can see immediately the significant reduction in downtime there. Importantly as well, for the client, it was a lot safer for the workers. They were no longer needing to be suspended in the basket, and they were not getting any environmental contamination. And then finally, they've seen significant increase in the life of those important wire ropes. Secondly, this involves the UK's largest crane at one of our nuclear power plant construction sites. When the team previously had to manually lubricate, as you can see there, 3 people, 3 weeks. So an unbelievable amount of work. They were brushing the grease onto the ropes. It was really messy and again, very dangerous. And once they implemented the use of a wire rope lubricator, it was then taking only 2 people, only 2 days. So again, huge reduction in downtime. And again, very, very much safer for those workers, much better for the environment. And again, we saw good wire rope life extension. The next case study, I mentioned it already, but Ascension Island, they have 16 very high communication towers there. Each of those have 16 guy ropes. Some of them are up to 100 meters in length. It was generally taking a team of 4 people several weeks. I don't have the exact figures. But again, the workers were having to brush the grease onto the ropes from a basket hanging below the rope, up to 100 meters in the air. It wasn't a popular job, took a long time, and was obviously potentially very dangerous. Plus, with the island environment, they were very concerned with the contamination issues. We now know it's only going to take 2 people. We're not sure the total number of days, as they've not completed all the jobs yet, but they've been over the moon with how much easier it's made their lives. They've set up this unit, as you can see. The lubricator is towed by a capstan winch up and down the ropes. They're still able, I say still able, they're able to even clean the rope. So they've seen a fantastic job with the amount of contamination removed, and it's meaning they're getting a really good protective layer of grease on these ropes. Because again, there's a lot of environmental exposure there, so they were having big problems previously with corrosion. And then the final one from India, a dredging operator. This was probably 6-7 years ago, when they were manually lubricating the ropes. These ropes were being replaced every 12 months, costing over $20,000. It was generally taking at least 24 hours to replace those ropes at a cost of $15,000 in downtime. Once they started using a wire rope lubricator and they were correctly lubricating those ropes, they were able to increase the rope life by about 6 months. It reduced the cost of replacement by up to 30%. So they were looking within 18 months, just on this one application, nearly $11,000 worth in savings, and once again, better for the environment. And those savings weren't even including the reduced lube labor or the reduced labor to change the ropes. So just a few final examples in terms of the key clients that are using rope lubricators around the world: ship-to-shore cranes, gantry, mobile tower. I mentioned mining winders. Good success as well with bulk carrier vessels, mooring ropes on ships. A lot of the Greek shipping fleet are using these products now. Offshore ROV cables, including some of the really large ones. And then interestingly, some more specific applications that are growing in popularity. So some of these huge retail warehouses where they have a lot of lifts involved, they're getting good success. And also cruise liners and lifeboat wire ropes, which are obviously critical for safety. Again, there's an increased use of those. So you can see just a snapshot there of some of the applications from around the world. So just to summarize, so why it's so important for quality lubrication of these ropes. We've proven that it's going to reduce the lubrication labor by up to 90%. We've proven it reduces the environmental impact of lubrication by minimizing the grease contamination. And we're improving the safety of maintenance personnel. And importantly as well, again, from a sustainability perspective, we're increasing the life of ropes by up to 300%. So in summary, we're guaranteeing customers a safe and effective operations. We're going to reduce their operating and maintenance costs and reduce the environmental impact. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. There are my contact details. So any other additional questions? I believe there are some questions, Martin, but thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you, Angus. Great presentation. We don't have any questions at the moment. We have comments, positive comments, and that it was a very interesting presentation. Great presentation as well from Bruno Kexa. Yeah, so we'll let you know if we get any questions coming in. Guys, you have 2 more minutes. If you want to ask questions, it's now.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate the positive. I've got a couple of questions here. Luca, what are these ropes used for? For cranes? So yeah, Luca, a lot of the ropes are used in cranes. But as I say, mining winders. But yeah, the main application we're targeting are cranes. And Ahmed, wire rope lubricant are very specialized products. Why majority companies don't produce? Ahmed, good question. I think a lot of the world's major lubricant companies do have some sort of wire rope lubricant. What I do find is some are trying to recommend maybe just a standard industrial type EP grease, which we wouldn't agree with. That one slide I showed, you saw the extensive list. Most of those products on their list are specific specialized wire rope lubricants. And as I mentioned, more and more we are seeing VGP compliant products very popular because of the whole sustainability message. So an environmentally acceptable lubricant needs to be biodegradable, non-toxic, and be able to break down in the environment. And they used to have quite a bad reputation in terms of poor performance. That is also now changing. I believe they're very high performance products available now that do a fantastic job. Greg, the value proposition of this product seems ridiculously high. Why isn't every wire rope in the world lubricated this way? Well, you're just a great salesperson. You know what? It's a great question, Greg. As I said, when I showed the video, I still can't believe how many companies don't know about the existence of wire rope lubricators and how many are still manually lubricating their ropes. So we're obviously ourselves and our competition around the world are doing our best to educate people in terms of the importance of high quality lubrication for ropes, and we're getting there. I mean, sales continue to rise for all the companies, just not our organization, but all the other companies that I know are selling these units. So, but as always, it's about education, and that's in our business. I know for all of us here today, getting them to understand that they're is a better questions, guys.
Yeah, I guess we have just one last question that came into the chat, and then we'll end it there. Ahmed asked if the water lubricator, how long does it take to get it installed, and is it available in Canada?
Yes, it is available. Put contact with them.
Okay. Yeah. We Angus, see his contact details, the last slide. So don't hesitate to contact him, and he'll help you out on that last point. Thank you everyone for attending, and then I'll say goodbye and enjoy the rest of LRVS 2023.